everybody, and welcome back to the IzzyVerse. Today's series is going to be a really good one. I'm excited to bring the artist that we have planned for today, Andy Smith. Before we get to our guest for today, I just want to go over a few things that we're going to be talking about coming up soon. Next week, I'm excited to announce that Baltazar is going to be with us. We're going to be here next week, and that's going to be a really, really fun interview. I'm excited to talk about Tiny Titans and all his other projects that he's been a part of. Next Saturday, I will be part of Big Apple Comic Con, so be on the lookout for that one. It's on Saturday, March 26th in the Wyndham New Yorker Hotels. The return of the Big Apple Comic Con. I haven't done one of these shows in a very long time, and I'm excited to be a part of it. Also coming soon, it's Free Comic Book Day, May 7th, 2022, first Saturday in May. It's actually the same week Doctor Strange is coming out. We are going to do a Free Comic Book Day event. More details to come in the future, and I'll let you know a little bit more about that. And finally, as always, I would like to give a plug to my comic book shop, Squiggy's Dugout, right, who's been there since 1988 in New Rochelle. So if you're looking for a comic book shop, Squiggy's Dugout is in New Rochelle. If you're out in the New Rochelle area, go check it out. So my guest for this evening has been working as a professional artist since 1991. He's worked in Marvel, DC, Image, Acclaim, CrossGen, and so much more. He's also worked in the commercial field as well for Chicago Bears, Idaho Potatoes, and Disney. He's also a best-selling author of Drawing Dynamic Comics, published back in 2000, as well as a second book, Drawing American Manga Superheroes, that was published in 2007. So let me introduce to you guys, without further ado, to Andy Smith. Hey, Andy.
Hey, how are you?
Good, good. So I was looking through your list of books that you have done, and you pretty much have done it all, man.
I guess.
It's like, the one person I'll compare it to is to Kirby, man. Nobody had known has done so much books that like you, and you've tackled pretty much everyone. And so, to say Kirby, it's one thing, but you know what I mean? It's like, I was just looking at everything, and I just stood there like, wow. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. It's definitely hard when people come up to me at conventions and that don't know me. And first and foremost, when I go to a convention and people come up to me, I always expect no one to know me. But there are the few people I meet that don't, and they're like, "Oh, what have you worked on?" And that's a tough one, because when somebody asks that, my mind will just go blank, and it's like, a lot of stuff. So
yeah, because I was looking at all the books and everything. Now I know you worked in as an artist, as a penciler, as an inker in some books. Like the one I think about the most when I think about your ink works is Blade, in particular. That's the one that kind of stands out the most for me. But then I'm looking at all this other stuff like Justice League. I know I am familiar with the 52 run, with the 52 issues. I know you're working on that as well. And then I'm just looking at just all this stuff that you have, man. It's it's nice to say that you pretty much worked on every character. Is there any character you have not worked off?
Oh yeah, I mean, once again, you ask that, my mind just goes blank. I'm sure there's a ton of them. The reason I've worked on a lot of stuff is because they might have called me in and been like, "You just draw this one issue or something." So, while I've worked on Superman and Batman, it's not like I had long runs on them. I would just do something here or there, or a one shot or something like that. And it's funny, you mentioned Blade, and on Blade, I inked. I think I inked 1, 2, 1 and 2, and then I drew 5 and 6, and then 3 and 4. Bart still drew, but I think Bill Sienkiewicz inked those. So it's funny because I only inked a couple issues of Blade. I thought you were going to say for sure, inking wise, the longest run I've ever had was for mainstream, working on Green Lantern over Darryl Banks, and then I think I did 7 or 8 issues over him. And then, over Bart, it's when we were at CrossGen and we started up that book called The First, where I inked 15 or 16 issues, something like that, I think, over him. And then other than that, I've inked a few other things over, different people. Like, I inked this like 3-issue run over Keith Giffen on a Spider-Man book back in the 90s. God, what else? I mentioned Darryl Banks, Bart. I haven't inked that many people. Is the fun thing or funny thing, because people will mention my inking, and I'm just like, for instance, I inked half an issue of Captain America over Ron Garney back in the late 90s. Because I was helping out my buddy John Beatty. We were sharing a studio, and the editor was like, "You guys split this," and we were like, "Oh yeah, no problem." But most of my careers, like you said, and has been penciling stuff. So
yeah, and I was looking at that. Let's start with the beginnings, right? The question I like to ask all creators is the same thing: what got you into comics in the first place? What love? Obviously, there's love and passion that goes on it, but what drew you in?
Drew me in, no pun intended. As a kid, I always drew, like most kids do. I always say, every kid, when you give them a pencil, and I'm talking, when I say kid, I mean like 2, 3 years old, will draw, color, whatever. But, and I use my daughter as the example. Once she, learned, when she became 4 or 5 and could do other things, she kind of pushed that to the side, which most kids do, I think. Whereas for myself and most artists, it's not something we push aside. It's something we want to keep doing and keep trying to get better at as we get older. And I discovered comic books probably in I remember buying my first one in 1980. I think it was 1982, and it was an issue of Captain America. And I just saw it at the 7-Eleven convenience store walking home from school, and the cover caught my eye. I picked it up. I looked through it. I was like, this is awesome. And that was like the bug right there. I just started buying Captain America every month. Then I found that there were comic shops in town close to me, so my dad would take me to those. And at that point, I was still drawing, but I was kind of like, this is what I want to draw. Because up until that point, I just liked to draw, but I didn't really have a focus on specifically what. And when I discovered comics, I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to draw. And I always say this, but I thought I want to draw big dudes and hot chicks. That's what I said as a teenager, and that is still what I say to this day. Is that's the fun stuff.
Well, you came into the business at the perfect time. Then you got the big dudes and hot chicks, because that was a big deal back then. I remember in the 90s when I was collecting books. Obviously, Liefeld, McFarlane, and Jim Lee, the big 3 guys of that era, were the ones that everybody wanted to draw, and everybody was trying to copy them. But one person I know, and obviously you could definitely talk to me a little bit about it, is your connection with Bart Sears. Because that's something that when I hear Andy Smith, Bart Sears' name is not too far away from me, to my mind side, because obviously you worked a lot together in a lot of things. But what's your connection with Bart in general? Were you just as friends, or was there anything more than just that?
Well, we met. So I went to the Kubert School, and that's what it's officially called now. When I went, it was the Joe Kubert School of Cartoon and Graphic Art. And I went from 1988 to 1991. It's a 3-year school. I went all 3. And in my 3rd year of school, when I started in the fall, in that September 1990, I saw that Bart was teaching there, because they had the Kubert School definitely had certain teachers that were there year end and year out, just repeating, right? But then every new year, there would be 1 or 2 new teachers that might come in. and just teach for 1 year and leave, or teach for a couple. And Bart was one that came in that year and was teaching second-year students. And like I said, I was a third-year student, so I was a senior. But it's not a huge school, and it also wasn't the type where it's like you stay in your lane. You're third year, you just talk to third year teachers and whatnot. No, I mean, you can walk around, talk to whoever. And I was a fan of Bart's work. I was buying Justice League Europe at the time. That's what he was drawing, of course. So I just, one day before school started, I got there a little early and just walked into his classroom and introduced myself and asked if he'd look at my art. And he said, sure. And I showed him some of the work I was doing. And I guess he liked it, or maybe he saw something in it, because he basically was like, yeah, this stuff's pretty cool. If you want to show me more, obviously this is where I am. And he taught 1 day a week, or he taught 2 days a week. And he's like, so, just come into my class whenever. So I would do that. And then we got to a point where he basically kind of took me under his wing, and he lived in town. And he was like, if you want to come and hang out on the days, after school, days I'm not there and stuff, here's my number. Just give me a call. Make sure I'm around. And I'd go over and hang out at his apartment and do homework and stuff while he was working on Justice League Europe. And, it became a real tight mentorship, because he would take tracing paper and put it over my work, and, obviously correct stuff that was wrong, or that he saw as wrong, just like Hubert would, or any of the other teachers at the school. But because for a number of months, I was really working with him on a one-on-one basis, that's kind of where some of his style, comes across in my work. And just through getting to know him and hanging out and talking, we would talk about, comics we liked as kids, because he's older than me, but he's not that much older than me. I think he didn't go off 3 years to the Hubert School. He only went for a year and a half. And I think his last year was in 1983 or 1984. And anyhow, so we would talk about comic artists we liked, and we shared a lot of the same artists, Steve Rude, Neil Adams, guys like that. And then we would talk about, art books that we liked. Obviously, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, but other artists, George Bridgman, Andrew Loomis, Bern Hogarth. So we had some of the same influences in regards to the books that we look to teach us how to draw as well. So, and that, that really helps out. It's not like if I would have said, man, I don't even know who those guys are, or not that, if he would have mentioned those guys and I said, ugh, I don't like any of that stuff. It's not like it would have caused a rift or anything, but it definitely helps when you like some of the same stuff, because you're already on the same page. And then in March of 1991, so going into finishing up the school year, because the school year ended in May, he just asked me if I wanted to take some of my sample pages, because I was obviously working on samples to try and get a job in comics, up to DC with him while he went there to drop off pages for Justice League. And I was like, sure, because the offices were only about 45 minutes away in New York.
Yeah.
So we went in, and he introduced me to some editors, and I showed him my work, and I got some feedback from the editors and told, this stuff looks good. Now go take what we told you and work up new stuff and come back. And that's what I did. I worked up new pages and went back a few weeks later and showed him around again. And some of the editors I talked to before said, this stuff's great. I just, honestly, I don't have anything available. And one editor that looked at the stuff, who didn't see the stuff before, so it was a new guy I met, liked it, and gave me my first gig. So,
so your first gig was that. So your first gig was actually in DC Comics.
Yeah,
that's what you say. All right, yeah. Cool. Yeah, because I did as I was doing my research and finding out all the books you've done, I've come across there's this site that gives me a listing of books, and I do have some books here. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and show them off so we could talk a little bit more about them. So let me add them to this. See here. So there's First Man. We'll talk about First Man a little later because that's a
of
big
course.
one, right?
Sure.
But I did find these two.
Oh yeah.
I found your name on the source book.
Yep.
So I was like, okay, so talk to me a little bit about these two because Brute and Babe is a big one for me in particular because obviously with Brutes and Babes, it's all about Wizard, right? When you talk about Wizards,
Oh
you're
yeah.
talking about these two guys. And I remember I was a firm Wizard collector. To the point that there was a time I stopped collecting comic books just because it's the hassle of it all. I guess it was in that time, but I always made sure I got a Wizard, right? So I think I have the entire Wizard run in my collection. I got angry when it turned into magazine format. I thought it was really nice that it was a comic book format, but
Yeah.
obviously with Brutes and Babe, um, it was all Bart Sears doing his how-tos and
Yep.
things like that. Talk to me a little bit about these two books, and then we'll move on to our next one.
Well, I mean, the Wildcats, like it says, it's a source book. And one of the things I loved growing up, and I can still remember getting it off the spin rack at a drugstore, was the official handbook of the Marvel Universe.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have the original ones that I bought back then. And I just love those. I was like, oh my God, this is great. I can't believe this has never been done before. So obviously, that's what the Wildcat source book is. And I can't remember the name of the character I drew, and I can't even remember how I got the gig, to be honest. How did I guess that was going to happen? I can't even remember how I got the gig, to be honest, but I was offered to do, a character in the source book. And I was like, oh, hell yeah. Because once again, just going back to the handbook stuff, it was something I always wanted to do. So, that was just a one-off, I think. Oh, no, actually, I did two. I did one in that one. And then they did another source book, but it was based, how Wildcats was a cartoon for a while?
Yeah, I remember the song is embedded in my head somehow.
All right. So
yeah, I remember
I think
Wildcats.
they did another source book that was for the cartoon because I know the character I did in that one. Once again, I don't remember the character's name, but they wanted it in more of the animation style.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that. And then Brute and Babe, what happened was after I graduated school in 91, I was working for DC. Then I worked for Marvel. I moved to Florida. I'm from Maryland, so I moved back to Maryland after I graduated. Then after that, I went to Florida, and it was the fall of 1993. And, Bart and I stayed in touch. We talked a lot and stuff, and he called me up and he said he was starting this company, Ominous Press, and he wanted to know if I wanted to be the art director. And to start off, he'd be, penciling the stuff, and he wanted me to ink it. And then if the company grew, obviously I'd be drawing a book and so on and so forth. And I said, yeah, man, that'd be awesome. The only downside to it was I had to move from beautiful Orlando up to Syracuse, New York.
Oh yeah,
So,
that's not a good move.
Yeah, that was a little kick below the belt. Especially because I bought like 3 or 4 months before I moved, maybe half a year before I moved, I bought my first car. Up until that point, I was driving a 1977. I think it was the Buick something. It was a beater, but in 1993, I bought new used. It was a used car, but new to me, and it was a sports car. So I moved up to Syracuse in November of 93 to work with Bart on Ominous Press. And that winter, I think I was up there for like 2 weeks, and the sports car is a no-go in Syracuse with the snow. So I ended up having to sell it and get an SUV instead. So that kind of stunk.
Yeah.
But what is this? Why is my phone ringing? All right, get rid of that. So the Infinity, if I remember right, that was the first one we did. And yeah, I was inking Bart. We were also doing stuff. He had a contract with the company Toy Biz to do toy design stuff for them, and it was all, you know, the Marvel licensed stuff.
Mhm.
And I was working on some of the toy design stuff with him as well, kind of ghosting it. So like he would turn it in and it was his name on all the stuff, and it was design stuff. So it's not like it was anything that ever saw print, but you know, I was drawing some of the stuff as well. And then he would kind of go over it when I got done with it, just to add any little nuances of his to it, because the whole point was it was, you know, his art that we were selling for the toy design stuff. So I did that, and Ominous Press lasted, unfortunately, only for about 1.5 years, and that's kind of when the bubble burst in comics, and
Yeah.
you know, it just really wasn't viable to do. So
Yeah, I remember that time.
yeah.
All right, so now we have some other books here that I found. Jack of Hearts. I remember these Cosmic Power books. I have a few of them. I think I have this one too. So I do remember it, and obviously when I see the cover, I immediately recognize it. And then I see Justice League Quarterly. So we talked a little bit, but you're one of those guys that was able to go back and forth from Marvel and DC. Were you on an exclusive contract with any of them, or was it just the situation is a work for hire and you just was able to just keep bouncing back and forth or anything like that?
It was just work for hire. The thing is, Justice League Quarterly. So the first book I did for DC that I mentioned was actually an issue of Suicide Squad, but it never got printed. It was what they call an inventory job, and an inventory job is one where they have the whole book, you know, penciled, inked, and everything. And then if it looks like the monthly book is running late, they can pull it out of the drawer and just send it to the printer, so there's no, you know, gap in shipping. But Suicide Squad apparently never ran late, so they never had to print the issue that I drew. So my next job after Suicide Squad was Justice League Quarterly. So that was actually my second job, but it was the first thing of mine that was actually in print. That was fun because I was able to, the first one I did, I think was issue 5, but they were only like 12 pagers. And I didn't ink the first one, and I don't think I inked the second one in issue 6, but 7, 8, 9, and I think 9 was my last issue. I did do the inking on because there were only 12 pages. And as you can see with issue 9, they actually let me, you know, they asked me if I wanted to draw the cover. So that was fun. That was my first cover. And then on the Jack of Hearts job at Marvel, you know, I think it was 6-issue limited series, the Cosmic Powers. And
Yeah, and everybody had like they were short stories, weren't they?
They were just one-offs, and each one was drawn by a different artist. So I got to do the Jack of Hearts one. Luckily, I got to draw Jack of Hearts in the costume you see on the cover and not the original costume, which would have taken forever. Not that I minded it, because I actually bought the Jack of Hearts limited series in the 80s and always actually liked the character.
Yeah, he was a cool looking character. He is a cool looking character. I'll admit to that.
But here's a fun little trivia thing about that cover is I did that when I was sharing the studio with Bart up in Syracuse, because that was a nice thing too. When I was doing the Ominous Press stuff with Bart, he wasn't like, and you have to quit everything. He was like, man, just as long as you fit my work in with whatever other work you're doing, that's fine. So I was able to still work, you know, and do Marvel stuff, whatever. So I drew that cover, and we were literally working in a studio where our desks were facing each other, you know, and I drew it and I said, hey, you want to ink this? And he's like, sure, why not? So he actually inked that cover.
I could see it. I could definitely see it.
Yeah, it's not credited. He didn't sign it. You know, my pencils were pretty tight. So yeah, so Bart actually inked that cover over me. And then, so yeah, that was a fun one-off. I got to draw Terrax. I got to draw. The funny thing is, I remember that story pretty well. I got to draw Terrax. I got to draw Thanos. And it's funny, there's a few pages throughout my career where I can remember specifically where I was at when I was drawing them. And there's a page in that book. I remember that it was Syracuse. It was supposed to snow one day, go figure. And, but it was actually, like a storm warning came through. And, instead of people coming into the studio for Omnibus Press to work, because it wasn't just Bart and I, we had his sister-in-law worked for us as the office manager. We had a couple other guys doing production stuff and coloring. And I think that day it was just decided everybody just stay home because of the roads. So I was like, okay. So I remember sitting down to draw a page from that Jack of Hearts book and looking out my window because my desk faced a wall and I had a window right next to me. And I'd look out the window first thing in the morning. I'm a morning person. It was probably 7:30, 8 o'clock. And it just started to snow. So you could still see the grass in the yard, everything. By the time I finished drawing the page, which, it takes me a good 7, 8 hours to draw a page. By the time I finished drawing the page that afternoon, there was 2 feet of snow on the ground. And I can vividly remember to this day drawing the page and looking out the window and seeing the snow just
rise up.
Now I was on a second floor. So it's not like I was on a first floor seeing it cover my window. I was on a second floor, but my car was in the driveway. And I just remember seeing the snow go over the hood of my car. So that is it's one of those pages I'll just never forget because of that. So
yeah, that's a cool story.
That was a fun job too.
All right, let's go with some more indie stuff here because you mentioned the next book that I'm going to show you. The first, right? Yeah. So CrossGen, that was an interesting company. You were definitely part of CrossGen, and I remember when CrossGen came out. There was some hype behind CrossGen, similar to when Valiant first came out. CrossGen was like the next one, and what was interesting about CrossGen in particular, remember watching it come out, was the fact that it had really good artists, but the artists that were involved weren't like superstar artists at the time. They were getting there. There were definitely people in that group that were,
sure,
I would consider, to this day, like great, like Steve McNiven, for example. Tell me your experience with CrossGen and how that was about with the first, and then we'll talk about the WWE Heroes, which I think is a fun one to talk about.
Oh, that was a fun one. CrossGen was cool. I remember before the company actually started being at MegaCon, probably the year before it started, so in 1999. And, Mark Alessi, the founder of CrossGen, was at MegaCon, and he was kind of just talking to people and stuff. And a bunch of us were sitting around. It was after the convention, probably at a bar, and Mark was talking about his idea and whatnot. And, it piqued my interest because of the studio atmosphere. And, obviously he wanted everybody to move to Tampa. It was in the Tampa area, so we'll just say Tampa because the actual city it was in, nobody would have heard of. So we'll go with Tampa. And I was living in Orlando. So I'm like, well, that's not that far of a move at all. So, real quick, when they were first hiring, they were only going to do 4 books, so they only needed 4 pencilers, 4 inkers, 4 colorists. They didn't need 4 letterers because, one letterer can handle 4 books. Mm-hmm. And they only needed 2 writers. So I actually sent my pencil work in and, to be considered for penciling one of the books. And, I got a letter back from Brandon Peterson saying, thanks. And, I knew Brandon, he knew who I was. He's like, thanks, but we have the 4 slots filled, but, stay in touch as we grow. Okay. Well, then Ron Mars got hired as a writer, and he suggested to bring Bart down for a 5th book. And because of my, my affiliation or friendship with both those guys, and especially Bart, knowing him for so long and working together, inking him at, Ominous and such, he was like, they basically said, why don't you come in as the inker on Bart and then, do that for like a year. And then we'll just, we'll transition Bart off the first and, get you on it penciling. Because I didn't get into the comic book business to be an inker. I always want the pencil. But I also said that if I got a chance to ink an artist I really like, I'm not going to turn it down. So I was like, yeah, that's fine. So that's how that worked out. We moved from Orlando to Tampa. We worked on the first for, like I said, I think it was 15 issues, maybe 16. I can't remember exactly. I know I started drawing it with number 25, but there was another artist before me that was working on it because I drew a few other things at CrossGen before the first. And I liked it. I liked the fact of getting paid every 2 weeks. I liked having health insurance. I liked having, sick days and vacation days and stuff. Now, granted, if you're out, if you have a sick day, 1 or 2, you still need to make up the work. If you're out sick for like a week or so, if something really bad happened, one of the things about CrossGen was we never put out a book late. Not one book shipped late. And that would be if 4 or 5 guys in the studio had to jump on to help inking it to get it out, or if, I'm sure there was an issue or 2 of a book that maybe had 2 different pencilers on it. But the whole point was not to put a book out late, and we never did. And it was just a nice community atmosphere working under one roof with all these other guys. At one point, I think we had 8 or 9 books going at one point. So that means we had 8 or 9 pencilers in house, 8 or 9 inkers. I know coloring wise, one colorist could color more than one book. And like I said, when it came to lettering, we had 2 guys doing all the lettering. And then, I think we had at one point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 writers in house. And then, the salespeople and stuff. So I thought it was a fun atmosphere. So I enjoyed it. I was sad to see the ship go down. I didn't stay until the very last day. I know some people did until literally it was like, okay, that's it. We just can't do it. And they, closed up shop. I wasn't one of them. I left, and I think I left around halfway through 2003, around summertime, I think, or fall of 2003 is when I left. And I think they were able to, I want to say they held out until the end of 2004, maybe. And then that's when they officially closed up.
Yeah, I don't think it had a long longevity, as unfortunately. I know when it did come out, it just kind of like it blew up.
Yeah, and part of it was just, and we tried warning them about it, and it was about expanding too fast because it was supposed to just be 4 books. And then when Ron floated the idea past Mark of having Bart come down, they created the first, for Bart. And the first was about the gods and was kind of, I guess you could say, almost like the parent type book over the other 4 that were out. And it was supposed to be, okay, it was originally going to be 4 books. Okay, now it's 5, but we're stopping at 5. We're just going to do 5 until, we start, money starts coming in, and then we can expand properly and blah, blah, blah. And it was just one of those things where, like you said, we did make a splash when the stuff came out. And I think the owner, Mark, just, his eyes got a little too big, and, he got this huge convention booth, which was really nice, but it wasn't cheap. And, really wanted to compete with Marvel and DC, but just basically blew that candle up so fast that it burned itself out just as quick. Instead of doing more of a slow burn, because, you look at the same time, Aspen, I think Michael Turner's company started around the same time. That company's still going. I'm trying to think what else. I'm pretty sure there were maybe a couple other that are still going. And, I think that if we would have stuck with just the 5 and even still say we stuck with the 5, but a year and a half in, the sales on, say, even the first aren't going up, then at that point you stick with the model of doing 5 books, but you go, okay, we're going to wrap this one up and try a new one. So your costs aren't going up, but you're realizing, okay, this was not working. Let's just wrap it up to a conclusion, start a new book, and see how that one does. But live and learn.
And to be quite honest, one of the things I will remember about CrossGen was the art was beautiful, had pretty good storytelling, but again, these are characters that you need to make iconic. They don't just become iconic,
right?
And that's the thing when you're dealing with something in particular. If it's not an iconic character, it becomes more challenging to get it up. Right. It's not like you had a movie deal coming and you gotta do things like that. And even with movie deals, there are books out there that have movies and they still haven't, they still didn't get that longevity.
Right.
But it was nice. I specifically love the coloring in CrossGen books in particular.
Well, and I think that's one thing that CrossGen definitely made the other companies kind of up their game in regards to production value. And then there are other things we did that people, tried to do. And one was, we did a few DVD motion comics with voice actors reading, the text and stuff. So instead of I have the Negation DVD because it has my issue. So it's cool to be able to look at it and hear the voice actors and stuff. I want to say there's no word balloons, but I honestly can't remember if we kept the word balloons so you could read along or if they were just gone because, there was movement into the panels and stuff and all that, kind of like, a motion comic. So we did that. We put out the different anthologies where we did full-size, trade paperbacks. That one was called Edge. And for instance, Edge would have 5 different stories in it. And it would be, say, the 5 first issues of it would be 5 first issues. So it'd be the first issue of the first issue of Scion, Sigil, Mystic, and I'm blanking on other original books. But
I'm trying to remember them too, and I can't remember
it. and those were at a lower price point because they came out basically 6-7 months after the floppies came out. So if you were just getting into CrossGen, you could be like, oh, I'll just get this trade paperback. And then next month I'll get the next trade that has the issue 2s and so on and so forth. We did the smaller digest size trades as well. I'm actually looking at my bookshelf because I think I have a few down there. So, we were innovative with stuff we were doing, it just, like I said, it just burned out too quick. So
yeah, definitely ahead of its time as far as production goes. Let's go to the next book, WWE Heroes. Yeah. One of the things that my channel does, we do wrestling reviews. Big
cool.
wrestling. Yeah, I'm a big wrestling fan. I've been watching wrestling since, gosh, as long as I can remember. One of the nice little things, moments of memory I have is I actually remember every WrestleMania main event up to I think 22. After that, it just gets blurry. I don't know why the new ones get more blurry. I think it's because there was more matches.
Right.
But when it comes to wrestling in particular, it's one of those things that I have a bondage with my father who's no longer with us. And I used to always watch wrestling. So when I saw that you did some of these books and I saw some of the artwork that you had in your website, I was like, oh, gotta talk a little bit about the WWE books. So talk to me a little bit about that process and working with licensed characters that are not your Spider-Mans or your Batmans.
It was fun. Keith Champagne wrote it. He's a guy I've known for almost 20 years now. And, he got the opportunity. This was back when he was trying to make the switch from just being an inker at DC, switch over to doing writing. So he would take any type of writing stuff, and he got the offer to write this WWE Heroes book for Titan, and Titan's a publisher out of the UK. And he asked me, he's like, I got this gig. Do you want to draw it? And I said, yeah, get me in touch with the guy. So, because I was a wrestling fan, I have now, I used to watch Raw and SmackDown religiously. Now I haven't done that in probably eight or 9 years.
So it's rough these days watching the WWE ones.
Yeah, I watched it in the heyday of The Rock when he first debuted. I pretty much watched wrestling as a kid in the 80s. I'd go to matches. I saw a match live when I was a kid in the 80s where it was Bob Backlund versus Sergeant Slaughter. And Slaughter took his riding crop and whipped the crap out of Backlund's back. And then I broke off for a little bit. Then I watched it pretty much all through the 90s into probably up to 2011 or 12. So anyhow, I was still kind of into it when this came about. And I had to do a 2-page sequence as a sample to get the job. So I did the 2 pages, and they liked the stuff, offered me the job, and I was like, all right, let's do it. And, it was fun. They were great. They sent me tons of photo reference for all the characters and stuff, still shots that they would use for promo shoots and stuff like that. There was, I want to say it was 6 issues. And there really wasn't there were only a couple things that were kind of a headache. One was, I want to say it was issue 2. I did the cover sketch and it got approved. It's like, great. So I did the pencils to the cover and it got approved. So now I can ink it. So then I inked it. And then I get a call or email. I always say call, but it's emails. I get an email from the editor saying, bad news. We got to redo the cover. Stephanie McMahon didn't like it. And I'll tell you why in a second. Stephanie and Triple H didn't like it. And I said, well, all right. I mean, I don't mind redoing it, but I'm going to get paid, right? Because you guys literally approved this from the sketch. Did she not see the sketch? And apparently she didn't. She only saw the finished ink before it went to color. So the sketch was, if you don't know the series, basically, spoiler alert, it deals with the past, like way back, and this one powered being that lives through the ages and eventually becomes, a WWE wrestler and stuff, whatever. And in issue 2, Triple H looks like he gets killed. So on the cover of the book, I drew the Undertaker on his knees, right? And he was cradling, Triple H. So instead of the typical cover like from Crisis, where Superman's standing up holding Supergirl, it was looking down. It was a down shot, and it was, a big figure of Undertaker holding Triple H. And when Stephanie saw it, and she was married to Triple H at the time, or they still are. She
still is. Yeah, they're still together. Yeah.
They just were like, no way, we're not going to do a cover where, because Triple H was the main man at the time. And they were like, we're not doing a cover where the main star looks basically in distress or whatever. So it's like, okay. So we did this other cover, which they still actually messed with too, where there was a brick wall, and on the brick wall was this big poster. And on the poster, it was a shot of Triple H looking straight on at him from like the waist up, and his head was down, and he was really in deep shadow. And then standing in front of the poster was Shawn Michaels on one side, and he was like, yeah, like, no, from like thighs up. And on the other side, I can't remember the female wrestler, but it was one of the female wrestlers, and her head was down and she was crying. So when the book actually came out, I guess they just really liked the shot of Triple H. So they just blew up on the cover to where the shot of Triple H took up the whole cover. So you didn't see any of the brick wall or anything. It was just Triple H with his head in shadow, strong light source. And I think it said RIP, RIP below him. So that was fine. And that wasn't a big deal. That, I've had to redo covers before. You get paid for it. That's fine. The stuff that was kind of aggravating in the book is I drew like a bunch of pages in an issue, and I remember it was Randy Orton, and I was inking this stuff too. And I get an email, and they're like, "Oh, Randy Orton shaved his head. We need you to go through every shot of Randy Orton and redo, do a patch because now he's bald. So when the book comes out, he'll be bald. We can't have the book come out from hair." And then there was another character. It wasn't Kofi Kingston. God, I can't remember what character it was, but basically he was throughout the book. And when I say throughout the book, he wasn't on every page, but there were probably 10 shots of him throughout the book. And they're like, he's no longer with the company, so do a patch over top of that with this wrestler instead. And this is all stuff I didn't get paid for.
Wow.
So it was because Titan is a lower budget, they're not Marvel and DC. So, it's just not in the budget to pay for this stuff. Sorry. It's like, all right. So basically it's either I do it or somebody else does it and it looks like crap. And I didn't want that. So I was like, I'll do it. So there were a few things like that. There was a big shot on a page I drew of John Cena, and he was kind of raging and yelling. And I drew him from like the thighs up, he had his denim. He was still wearing his jorts and stuff during this period. And when the book came out, apparently they thought I drew him too big. So they had somebody go in and adjust the art so he wasn't as big. And that just pissed me off because I have all the originals. Everything is just scanned and emailed. And I told the guys, and thankfully they didn't do an awful job, but I noticed it because I'm the guy that drew it. And I was like, why didn't you say something to me? I would have easily, you tell me to change other stuff. You could have just said, look, Cena's a little too massive. Could you tone him down some? And I would have. So, little things like that. But overall, it was a fun experience. It was, for the most part, it was pretty much hands off, and it was fun to do. So,
Yeah, I was going to ask you with regards to the wrestling community. Obviously, things change all the time. Babyface become heel, or
yeah,
someone's being released, especially nowadays where the WWE motto is, "But let's make more money, so let's get rid of some people." Um, which I don't understand what's going on there. But yeah, that was one of those questions I was going to ask you. Is like the Randy Orton situation. He shaved his head. Now you have to go back and redo it because he has this look now as opposed to that look, and things like that. So thanks for sharing that. That's actually pretty cool story to hear, in particular because I like I said, I watch wrestling all the time. I really don't collect wrestling comic books, because they don't seem to be as entertaining, I'll say. Um, or they seem to be like for 12-year-olds and under sometimes. I
yeah,
know there's some books that actually were like, I know the Undertaker books were a little more mature based, which was cool. But
yeah. I mean,
when I saw it,
this story had a nice fantasy element to it. It wasn't just like, oh, we're gonna do a wrestling comic about wrestlers and their conflicts in real life. So
yeah,
this one had more of a, like I said, it went through time and stuff. I got to draw some conquistadors. I got to draw Civil War stuff, WW2 stuff, World War II stuff. It went through these different time periods and such. And it was kind of a mystery to find out who was this guy from way back in time that is just immortal that can live forever. And it was kind of a mystery because it wasn't Triple H, but that's one path that they kind of, the story kind of led you down and stuff. So
awesome. All right, let's get to some more creator owned stuff. So one character I noticed, and I saw Demogod.
oh, Demigod, yeah.
Demigod, right? Demigod. That's what. And I actually remember seeing this before in the past, and I was like, "Oh, wait a minute! It's interesting character. It reminds me a little bit of Prime from Malibu Comics. When I originally saw the image, with him in the mirror. Talk to me a little bit about Demigod.
Demigod. So, we tried, Bart, Ron, and another buddy of ours tried to revive Ominous Press back in 2016. And it was going to be 3 4-issue miniseries at first. And then depending on how they went, we'd decide what to do from there. And Demigod was the character I was going to do. Or I did do, I should say. And it was 4 issues. We had a publishing deal with IDW at the time where, it would be Ominous Press with IDW. So it was solicited in the catalog under IDW because they had better placement than if we just did Ominous Press and such. I don't, hindsight's 2020. I don't necessarily think doing that was the right idea because, by doing that, you had to split profits and stuff with them. I think it would have just been fine doing Ominous Press and just being in, the back of the catalog with the other companies. Because you know how the Diamond catalog looks. It's basically in the front. Well, it used to be, in the front, Marvel, DC, Image, IDW, Boom, Dynamite, and Archie. Then in the back of the catalog was all the other companies. I still think that probably would have been the better way to go than having to split stuff with IDW, but whatever. And Demigod is basically the story of Jason Andrews, who is a typical 17-year-old teenage slacker. And he gets this power and transforms into this demigod who goes by Hercules. And unlike, so I see what you're talking about Prime, but unlike Prime, he can't change back. That's just how he looks now. But he's kind of an a-hole. He's definitely not, I'm going to use this power for good right out of the gate type of character. It was a fun 4 issues. I wish I could say it came out, 4 months in a row, like 4 issues should. Unfortunately, it didn't, just because of other jobs that came my way that I had to do and stuff. And I know issues 1 and 2 came out as floppies. Because 3 and 4 were so late, IDW decided not to do them. So we just put out trade paperback collecting 1 through 4. So there unfortunately aren't the single issues of 3 and 4, which, I suggested to the guys. I said, look, I get it. IDW doesn't want to do it. I still think we should just solicit them ourselves in the catalog and put them out as 3 and 4. And then a few months later, let's do a trade paperback. Because if we just do a trade paperback, people that bought 1 and 2 are going to be like, what the hell? Now I got to buy a trade paperback for, I was overruled. So it just came out as the trade paperback. And we crowdfunded it. And, it's good. I've got some of the trades. I think it's a great story to read through. It's definitely a self-contained 4 issues. Would I like to do more of it? Of course. It was definitely fun to do. I'd love to be able to revisit it someday, but, it did, maybe if we ever do Ominous again, it'll be the 3rd time's a charm because we tried it twice. So who knows? Yeah. Maybe if we ever try to revisit it. So
let's talk a little bit about your character, the one that you really want to promote these days, and that's First Man.
Yeah.
First Man, I know for a long time. I've known him for a long time because I learned about First Man through drawing dynamic comics.
Sure.
Which I definitely want to talk to you about because I just want to show you. I got my first printing.
There you go.
And I will say, from all the drawing books I got back in the day, this was one that I looked at a lot. And I mean a lot.
I didn't start, obviously, a trend, but when I proposed this book, drawing dynamic comics, it was 1997, right? Because I basically went to the bookstore, went to the how to draw section, and took a pad and paper with me because back then all they had were flip phones, so it's not like you could take notes on your phone. And besides How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, there was only, I think, one, maybe two other books on actually drawing comic books. I mean, there were other books on cartooning, but not specifically drawing comics.
Mhm.
So I wrote down some publishers, and there was one publisher that stood out in the How to Draw section called Watson Guptill. They're now Random House. I guess Random House basically bought them or something some years ago. But Watson Guptill, I noticed in the How to Draw section at the Barnes & Noble, they had tons of books on painting, you name it. They seemed to be the main publisher. So I went to their website, checked it out. I wrote a proposal on the book I wanted to do, mailed it off to them, snail mail. And lo and behold, 2 days later, and I remember for a fact because I mailed it in a priority envelope, because I knew if I mailed it just regular mail, yeah, it would go to New York. It would get there in 3 or 4 days. But if I mailed it priority, I knew it would get there in 2 days, And my wife actually asked me at the time, she said, when do you think you'll hear something? And I said, are you kidding me? I said, this is a major New York book publisher. They probably get crap like this every day, multiple proposals for stuff. I said, who knows if I'll ever hear anything? I swear in the Bible, 2 days later, I'm in my studio drawing an issue of Spider-Man for Marvel. It was a Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man issue. My phone rings, and I answer it, hello. And the person was like, this is so-and-so from Watson Guptill. Swear to God, nothing clicked in my head. I just thought it was a solicitor trying to sell me something. So I wasn't rude, but whenever it's a solicitor, I'm just, I'm a little more short. And I was just like, okay. And she goes, yeah, we got your book proposal and we want to talk to you about doing it. And then click, and everything changed. I was like, oh, hey, how's it going? And she's like, yeah, we got the proposal. We think it's a great idea. We want to publish it, get you a contract, blah, blah, blah. So that's how, that came about. And then the book itself actually came out in June of 2000, because I remember it came out the same month I started working at CrossGen. And then it seemed after that, these other companies popped up, like smaller publishers. And then it was like How to Draw Comics this way, How to Draw Comics this way, how to do this, how to color, and it was just like, holy crap. So
yeah, and I remember
popping up.
I can't tell you when I got it. Obviously, I've had it for a long time because it's the first printing that I have.
Yeah.
I opened it up and it says first printing. I was like, oh, this is a first printing.
Yeah, because it went through 7. So
yeah, it went through 7. But I remember picking it. I remember getting it, and I remember using it. Now, I've been drawing long before, just like you. I've been drawing for a long time, but I didn't really get into drawing like to a point that I could make it something until I was more in junior high school, where a teacher kind of saw, hey, you're always doodling. Can you do something for our papers and stuff like that? And so I ended up doing things like that. And obviously at that time I was collecting comic books. I started collecting in 87.
Sure.
So I just kept on doing it. But like you said, there really weren't that many how to draw books. And this was before the boom of the internet really took off, right? Where you could just go and watch a video of how to draw this or how to do that or how to do anything, or iPads or anything like that. So obviously books like this didn't really exist. They did, but I'm sure you might have heard of the writer Christopher Hart.
Oh yeah.
So Christopher Hart's the guy that I know for a fact that always has there was always 6 versions of his book. Of different versions that Christopher Hart did. But what I didn't like about it was that it felt more cartoony rather than comic booky.
Well, even he did do one for comics, but he didn't do he's an artist. Don't get me wrong. I've talked to him before. Years ago, probably 20 years ago. Some of his how to draw books, the more cartoony ones, he did the art in, but then the one, because I have a couple of them, the comic book more related ones, he would hire out the artists to do drawings of basically a finished drawing like you see on the cover. And then what he would do is he would he would break it down into the initial steps and work backwards. Like, all right, let me just put tracing paper over it and do basic do anatomy. Let me put tracing paper over that and do basic shapes. Let me put tracing paper over that and do a rough sketch. And then in the printed book, it would be step 1, 2, 3, 4, because I know Daryl Banks, who, used to draw Green Lantern, did some work with Christopher Hart. Kieron Grant did some work for Christopher Hart. So he hired other guys to do the art inside the book. And the thing is, as I say, I talked to him. He wanted to hire me, but if you worked for him, you had to sign a non-compete saying you would never do your own book for a certain period of time. And I was like, I'm not doing that. Mm-hmm. So, I did my own. Now, Christopher Hart is super uber. I mean, the guy has over 100 books out.
Oh, yeah.
In multiple languages, multiple printings. He's a book machine. So.
Yeah, and nothing against him. I actually do own a few of his books, but then there are those that were lesser quality, I'll say.
Right.
And that's what it was. But when I saw this one in particular, the word dynamic really stands out for me, because not only is it a how to do certain things, there was just certain things that you don't normally get to see in a book. Like, one of the things I didn't like about how to draw books in some cases was the fact is, this is how you draw a woman, this is how you draw an animal, but nothing about sequential work, where this was one of those books that really dove into the idea of sequential art, taking a lot of what understanding comics would do, but more simplified.
Right.
And that's what I drew to it. And it was one of those books that I tell you, I'm not kidding when I said it. I looked at this book all the time when I had a drafting table and I would draw, the book would be on the side, because if I was like, okay, I need to figure out how to do something, I could just open the book and look at it, not copy from it, but learn from it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what how to draw books are for. They're to have next to your desk to reference. Dude, I still have books next to my desk that I look at every now and then. Even though I wrote one, I still look at, every now and then I'll look at an anatomy book if, like, I'm drawing something and I'm just, having an issue figuring out a certain muscle or whatever, so I still look at stuff. I think every artist I know does. Mm-hmm. And that's what they're for, just to have next to your desk as a refresher.
Yeah, so. And it serves as a really good reference book on getting certain things done, a certain way. I was looking through it this week, and it was like, I was looking at the page that you had different styles of artists doing it.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that page was awesome. Just looking at it, I was like, oh, look, J. Scott Campbell. Oh, look, Kevin Nolan. I was like, had him draw different versions of First Man, which I just thought was cool just to see that.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit more about First Man, and then we'll talk a little bit about your style, and then we'll pretty much call it a day.
All right. I mean, First Man, as you show, originally came out through Image as just a regular 24 pages, I believe, through Image. But because, it's creator owned, I had to fund it all. Unfortunately, I couldn't do an issue 2. So once I decided to dive into the whole crowdfunding thing and do my own book, I want to do First Man again, because it is, no pun intended, my first love. I designed the guy back when I was a teenager, and I wanted to draw him again. So the first thing I wanted to do was finish the story, because that book does say to be continued. So I have all the original art, so I scanned it all in. I did what I like to call my Neil Adams, and what I mean by that is Neil, when DC reprinted some of his Batman stuff from the 70s, he went in and redrew some faces and some figures and such. So since this book at the time was 25 years old or 24 years old, I went in and I redrew some faces and some figures. I had the whole thing recolored. And then to finish the story for volume 1 that I crowdfunded, I added 35 pages of art to finish the story. So now that volume 1 is a complete story. It finishes that first story arc. And then, the crowdfund, the volume 2 that's going on now is a totally separate story. It's self-contained from the standpoint of, You don't have to read volume 1 to get it. It would be nice. I would prefer if you got volume 1 as well. But you don't have to. And it's kind of like most people do that do their own character. We all grew up in comics, and you look at even like Wildcats and Youngblood and that stuff, and even Spawn, and you can go, oh, Spawn, that's kind of like a little Batman this and a little bit of this character. And for me growing up, I loved Captain Marvel, Shazam, Billy Batson changing into a hero. I loved Captain Marvel comics with Jim Starlin and the cosmic stuff. And I love the humor of Spider-Man. So basically I kind of mixed all that together and came up with First Man, because it has that humor. It has that teenage, character that's a freshman in college, that he gets these superpowers to become the First Man, and he has to battle in the first volume this character Monarch, who is the big purple dude on the cover of Drawing Dynamic Comics. And then I wanted to have somebody balance it out. Whereas, First Man's the true hero, Monarch's the true villain. So Penumbra, the female character, is kind of the in-between where, she's good, but at the same time, if she has to break some rules, she's fine with doing that. So she's the in-between type character. And I want to have a woman as well to round out the cast. I wanted to have the standard superhero type physique, which is First Man. I want to have the big, huge guy, Monarch, and I want to have, the hot babe, Penumbra. So
awesome.
That's it.
All right. So I took the liberty of grabbing a page from your website, and this is the one I ended up taking. I ended up taking the Batman 712.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and see, because it seems smaller for me, so I'm gonna put myself in full screen mode so I could see it a little better. But so I'm looking at this image here, and what I'm seeing is Two-Face, right? We see Two-Face, and what we're seeing is Batman's coming in. He has a clicker. I see that. So he's about to blow something up, right? It's a bomb ready to blow up.
Bomb detonator.
Yeah, all that good stuff, right? Good comic stuff. But what I specifically liked about it was the expression in his eyes, especially his evil side, and stuff like that, where the first image you have it, and in the second image, and it's almost it's pretty much the same image, but the difference is that the movement of the eyes,
right?
So storytelling wise, it's amazing. And I love storytelling more than anything. One of the reasons why I love your book is just you guiding the eye. I learned a lot from guiding your eyes, where a lot of people don't do that in books, even to this day, even the main books. So talk to me a little bit about the process you make when you read a script. In this case, 712. I forgot who wrote it, but when you read the script and then you make the decisions you make in here.
I honestly can't remember who wrote it either. This is a job where I didn't draw the whole book. I was called in to help out. I think I did 7 or 8 pages. And, the writer, whoever the writer is, I know it's DC, so I know it's full script. And full script is basically, panel 1 and what happens, panel 2 and what happens. But it still gives the artist more room to play, because panel 1, for all I know, could have just said a close-up of Two-Face, looking intently or whatever off panel. Panel 2, he clicks the button to detonate a bomb, because I know Batman at this point, they're at a construction site. They're high up on a building under construction, and he's obviously fighting these guys. And then, we cut to Batman in the midst of fighting these guys. I'm sure that's probably all it said. It didn't give direction like he's kicking this one guy and this other guy's doing this. It was just, he's fighting these guys.
It wasn't like an Alan Moore. It wasn't like an Alan Moore script.
No.
Well, I've heard Alan Moore scripts.
Yeah, no, not at all. And, a bomb goes off in the background, and then the next panel is probably another close-up of Two-Face, and he looks over. He's not looking at his clicker going by the hand that I drew it in, so I can't remember what it was specifically. Oh, you know what? I think maybe on the next page, I think not Catwoman, some other character I believe is in the scene with him, so he might be looking over at that character. But point is, he clicks again, and it said, last panel, Batman runs off as more bombs go off, because I know the page turns to oh no, it doesn't turn to a splash page. There's a splash page of him diving at you. And I just thought, I know when I broke it down, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a 6-panel page. And I thought it would be cool to do specifically the 2 panels of him clicking the same size, because it's the same action. So there's no reason to make one of the panels bigger of him clicking it. And honestly, it's the same shot. I didn't even have to draw it twice. I drew it once, but because of, this job was inked blue line, which means I still have my pencils to it. The inker got high-res scans of the pencils, printed them out full size in blue, and inked those. So to make the page look complete, I, in Photoshop, took that second panel and just copied it to put in for the 5th panel. And then I thought, okay, instead of just the close-up, I want the camera in really tight because the eyes can be expressive. So why do a whole face where you see his mouth and stuff? I want to focus on the eyes, so I zoom the camera in rather tight for the close-up of Two-Face. And I thought, since that's, twice on the page as well, I'll keep those the same size, and I'll make the bigger panels the panels of him fighting. Now, hindsight being 2020, I might have, if I were to do this page again, I might have made the 3rd panel of him where he's kicking the guys and stuff a little not as tall. So the bottom panel could have been a little bit taller and bigger and more impactful of him running at you with the explosions in the background. Mm-hmm. But I'm guessing my mindset at the time was, let's give the same amount of importance to each of those panels. And the way you do that is to make them the same size. Mm-hmm. So I wanted those to be the important panels on the page. So I made those bigger, and I also bled them off the page to the sides. Mm-hmm. So the Two-Face panels are encapsulated by themselves. They don't bleed. And then obviously the little inset of him clicking is a small panel. So it's not a big action. It's not super important. Then you go to the 3rd panel, which is the nice big panel, and we cut the Batman kicking the crap out of these dudes. Then you kind of get focused in on the extreme close-up. And the other reason I didn't want to bleed that panel off the page and to keep it with the white border around it is, as the camera zooms back into that tight close-up, you get more of a sense of that by having the white around it. So it kind of really, the camera pulls your eye in, and just the panel borders themselves constrict as well. And then you get to the little clicking, and then the panel opens up again to bleed off the page with the explosion and, Batman coming at us. And then even in regards to how I put Batman's face totally in shadow in that last panel, I just thought, with the explosion behind him being, basically the main light source and stuff, I thought, that'd be a lot cooler if if I just do his face totally in shadow, so you don't see like, ooh, is his mouth open? Like, oh crap, or it's more mysterious. You don't know what his expression is. He's just like, time to get out of here. And of course, I want to get some nice perspective on it with the hand in the foreground and all that stuff. So
yeah, because when I see it, I think obviously comic books, when you read a comic book, you read it like you're watching a movie or something like that. So when I look at the eyes in particular, it's almost like when you're watching a film and it goes letterbox format and it just shrinks up a little bit. So I see that, and you see the small click in the hand, and then you get the big massive explosion. So this was the page that really stood out of all the pages I was looking at. I love all of them, but this is the one I was like, oh, there's more expression here. There's storytelling in a certain way that, that it's good for, inspiring artists to see.
Sure.
So it's great seeing that. So let's remove this and let's get back to full screen view. All right. So, yeah. So first and foremost, man, thanks for doing this again. I think this was it's always a blast having creators in my show and just talking to them about what their thoughts were, especially with one with the longevity as yours now. When you think about it, you've been doing comics for a very long time now. When you think about it,
I
um,
know.
it's crazy thinking of it that way, right? 91 is a long time. Um, Besides First Man, is there anything else that's on the horizon that you're willing to share?
Well, I mean, I just finished the art for the new First Man book. It's I finished the last page on what's the date? Thursday, on Tuesday, and then just like the first book, I have some in the back of the first book. I have the bio pages, which I do in the exact same format as the original.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
I
handbook
loved
to
it.
the Marvel Universe, because I love those, and I you know, obviously, if you look at, say, the Wildcats one you showed earlier, you know, you can get real designy with it with the backgrounds and stuff, but there's just something about the bare bones nature that Marvel did when they put that book out in the 80s that I love. And I was like, that I'm copying that layout and everything. So I've got 5 more of those to be in the back of volume 2 with the 5 new characters that are introduced in the book. So each one gets their bio page. And then just like in the first book, I have my own hosted, not hostess, but hosted pie ad, parody ad, because once again, by the time I got into the business, they stopped doing those. And that was something I loved growing up. So there's the First Man hosted pie ad, which is brand new for this book as well. So right now I'm actually really just focused on the production now of, you know, the colorist I'm working with is turning in pages on a weekly basis. The script is being tightened up and some of the lettering is being done by my friend Steve Dutro, who I went to the Kubert School with. So it's now just in the phase of getting all the production stuff done for the book so I can get it to the printer along with the ancillary stuff of the mini print and oversized trading card and stuff like that. And then after this, I'll decide what the next campaign is going to be that I'll launch over the summer. You know, it might be First Man Volume 3 because it is kind of a trilogy, but at the same time, this is, you know, unlike a monthly book, which is, you know, you do it and you move on to either something else, or, you know, you stay on a book for a year. After about a year is when I think the longest run I've done on a book is 10 issues. And about then you kind of get the itch to want to do something else. And I've basically been with First Man for almost 2 years now. So I might do something else for my next campaign. I haven't quite decided yet. So
I'm looking forward to that. I know you're in the YouTube business, right?
oh yeah, I've got a YouTube
Yeah.
channel. Yep. I think if you just Google Andy Smith, or if you just search for Andy Smith Art or Andy Smith Cartoonist, it'll show up on YouTube. So, you know, I try to go live a couple days a week to either just chat or I set up a different camera aiming at my desk and I draw. You know, I'll do a sketch or something live. I also do pre-recorded videos that I call book looks, where I pull a book off my shelf. The camera's faced right down and I just flip through the book and give my commentary. And sometimes it's comic books. Sometimes it's a how to draw book that I think is really cool, or an art book. So I try to do 2 to 3 of those a week as well. So yeah, check out the YouTube channel. And of course, you know, like and subscribe to it. And yeah.
Cool.
Oh my God.
And there's the sign.
And of course, my home phone, which I don't know why I even have, likes to ring 3 or 4 times a day, and I never answer it. So
Well, yeah, I got my phone here, and in the process as we were talking, I'm getting messages from other creators saying, "Hey, we could do this on this day. Okay, we could do it on that day." Because
yeah.
you know, I'm doing my best to get as many people as I possibly can.
Oh yeah.
And a good in a good and you know, in a good pattern. You know, I'm trying to stick to 1 or 2 a week,
Sure.
but at the same time, like you said, always have something out, right?
Yeah.
And things like that. So it has been a blast talking to you. I know you have a very busy evening ahead of you. I thank you for your time. I'll
Oh,
definitely
thank
keep in
you.
touch. Whenever you're in the New York area, if you're doing a con, I'll go check you out because that's
Yeah,
where
dude.
that's where I'm based. I'm right
Okay.
in the city. I got a show next week, so
Oh, nice.
yeah, Big Apple's back. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, so definitely doing that one. So Andy, before I let you go, where can everybody find you?
It's easy. Twitter's at AndySmithArt. Facebook is the same. Instagram's the same. And then, like I said, and my website is AndySmithArt.com. And then YouTube, just, search Andy Smith cartoonist or artist, and you'll see this lovely mug, and you'll know you have the right channel to subscribe to.
Yeah, I know that you had one in this particular book. You had a website. I went to check it out, so I think it's no longer active.
No, it's
And
Laugh a Minute.
yeah, laugh a minute. I said that, and then it's such a beautiful photo of you right there before the goatee.
That's right. 25 years old photo there. So
Yeah. So thanks again, man. I really appreciate it, man.
yeah, dude, you got it. Thank
All
you.
right. All right. So I'm gonna put you in the side here while I close up. All right, guys, that was our interview with Andy Smith. Looking forward to more interviews with him and with more people to come up. So we'll see you next time on the IzzyVerse. Take care, guys. Bye.